A single adult bear can weigh more than 300 kilograms, and some individuals can weigh far more. That is an enormous amount of body mass from one animal, potentially enough to provide hundreds of meals. In a world where humans have eaten everything from tiny birds to massive whales, bear meat seems like it should be an obvious source of food. One successful hunt could potentially provide enough meat for a family, a hunting camp, or even an entire village for days or weeks. Bears are found across large parts of North America, Europe, and Asia, and humans have been hunting and eating them for thousands of years. So why don't we see bear meat beside beef, pork, and chicken in supermarket? Why did an animal capable of producing so much meat never become a normal part of the global food system? The answer begins with something simple: bears are wild animals, not livestock. Unlike cattle, pigs, chickens, or sheep, bears were never domesticated for efficient meat production. A bear requires enormous amounts of food, plenty of space, secure territory, and careful handling. It also takes years to reach its full size. A broiler chicken can reach slaughter weight in roughly 6 to 8 weeks. A pig can reach market weight in several months. A cow can be raised through a highly predictable agricultural system. A bear grows slowly and requires far more resources, making it a terrible candidate for commercial farming. Even though one bear can produce a large quantity of meat, producing that bear in the first place would be far more expensive than raising conventional livestock. The problem becomes even clearer when you consider what bears actually eat. Bears are opportunistic omnivores, and their diets can include berries, nuts, roots, insects, fish, small animals, carrion, and human food depending on where they live. Before winter, some bears spend months consuming enormous quantities of calories to build the fat reserves they need to survive. This means a bear's body is not simply a giant package of lean muscle. A significant portion of its weight consists of bones, skin, organs, connective tissue, and fat. The animal may weigh hundreds of kilograms, but the amount of usable meat is considerably smaller than the total body weight suggests. That fat can also make bear meat very different from ordinary meat. Bears can develop enormous fat reserves, especially before hibernation, and the flavor of that fat depends heavily on what the animal has been eating. A bear living on berries, nuts, fish, and wild vegetation can produce very different tasting fat from a bear that has spent months feeding around human garbage. Some cultures have traditionally valued bear fat as an important source of calories, while others consider it too strong or unpleasant. Unlike the relatively predictable fat from farmed pork or beef, bear fat can vary considerably from animal to animal. The meat itself is also different from supermarket meat. Bear meat is generally dark, dense, and strongly flavored because bears are active wild animals that use their muscles constantly. A farmed chicken bred specifically for meat production spends its life in controlled conditions designed to produce soft, mild muscle tissue. A bear spends its life walking, climbing, swimming, fighting, searching for food, escaping threats, and covering enormous distances. Its muscles therefore develop differently. Some people compare properly prepared bear meat to a rich, dark form of pork, while others describe it as intensely gamey. Preparation makes a major difference, but even perfect cooking cannot turn bear into chicken. Then comes the biggest problem of all: parasites. Bear meat is well known for its potential to carry trichinella, a parasitic roundworm that can infect humans who eat contaminated meat that has not been cooked thoroughly. The parasite can exist inside muscle tissue, meaning there is no reliable way to identify contaminated meat simply by looking at it. This makes proper cooking absolutely essential. Trichinellosis can cause serious illness, and wild game is an important source of exposure in regions where people consume undercooked meat. Conventional livestock production operates under controlled conditions designed to reduce these risks, while a wild bear has spent its entire life outside that system. A bear's diet creates another layer of uncertainty. These animals can eat carrion and whatever edible material they encounter. In areas where bears have become accustomed to human settlements, they may consume garbage, spoiled food, or other waste. This does not automatically make the meat unsafe, but it demonstrates why wild animals cannot be treated like farm animals. Farmers can monitor livestock feed. They cannot monitor everything a wild bear has consumed throughout its life. Even if the meat were perfectly safe, harvesting a bear is difficult and dangerous. Bears are enormously powerful animals equipped with strong jaws, sharp claws, and surprising speed. Hunting one requires specialized equipment, experience, careful planning, and knowledge of local regulations. A wounded bear can become extremely dangerous, meaning a successful hunt is not comparable to harvesting a farm animal. And after the animal is killed, the work is far from finished. A large bear must be field dressed, processed, cooled, and transported. In remote wilderness, moving a carcass weighing hundreds of kilograms can become a major logistical problem. Hunters often have to process the animal where it falls rather than transporting the entire carcass. There is another biological reason bears could never become a major global meat source: they reproduce relatively slowly. Chickens can produce huge numbers of offspring. Pigs can have large litters. Cattle can reproduce regularly under managed conditions. Bears produce comparatively few cubs, and mothers invest enormous amounts of time and energy raising them. Cubs remain dependent on their mothers for a long period. If too many adult females are removed from a population, the population cannot recover quickly. That makes bears particularly vulnerable to overhunting. This is why bear hunting is regulated in many parts of the world. Depending on the region and species, governments may establish hunting seasons, quotas, licensing systems, protected areas, and restrictions on which animals can be harvested. These regulations exist because wildlife populations cannot reproduce at the speed of livestock. If a farmer loses a percentage of chickens, the flock can be replaced rapidly. If a wild bear population loses too many breeding females, recovery can take many years. Humans have nevertheless eaten bear meat for centuries. In parts of North America, Russia, Scandinavia, and Asia, bear has remained a traditional wild game food. Indigenous communities and rural hunters have developed methods for using much of the animal rather than wasting it. The meat can be roasted, stewed, smoked, or preserved, while the fat can be rendered and stored. In some traditional societies, a successful bear hunt could provide an extraordinary amount of food precisely because the animal was so large. But that does not mean bear was ever an ideal livestock species. It was valuable because hunting one occasionally could provide a major seasonal food resource. And that distinction explains everything. Bears are useful as wild game precisely because they remain wild. They roam large territories, find their own food, reproduce naturally, and become available to hunters when circumstances allow. Turning them into livestock would mean replacing that natural system with expensive artificial feeding, secure enclosures, veterinary care, breeding programs, and specialized facilities. Humans would essentially spend enormous amounts of money raising a dangerous animal that grows slowly, reproduces slowly, and consumes huge quantities of food. Meanwhile, pigs, cattle, chickens, and sheep already produce meat much more efficiently. Culture also plays an enormous role. Most people do not look at a bear and think livestock. They see a wild animal associated with forests, mountains, wilderness, mythology, and conservation. Chicken has been culturally defined as food for generations. Cattle became livestock. Pigs became livestock. Bears remained symbols of the wild. Once societies develop strong ideas about which animals belong on farms and which belong in forests, those ideas become part of the entire food system. So the irony is that one bear really can provide an enormous amount of meat. A large animal can potentially feed a family or community for a long time. But size alone does not make an animal a practical food source. Bear meat can carry serious parasite risks if improperly cooked. Bears are difficult and dangerous to hunt. They reproduce slowly. Their diets are unpredictable, their bodies contain large amounts of non-meat tissue, and farming them would make almost no economic sense compared with conventional livestock. The bear therefore occupies a strange position in human history. It is big enough to feed a village but too inefficient to feed a supermarket. It can provide hundreds of meals but may require an entire expedition to harvest. It produces valuable meat and fat but remains biologically unsuited to industrial farming. Humans never needed to transform the bear into a food-producing machine because other animals already performed that job far better. So the next time you see a massive bear standing in a forest, remember what you are actually looking at. It is an animal capable of carrying enough food to fill a freezer for months, yet it never became another chicken, cow, or pig. Humans did not completely reject bear meat. We simply discovered that the bear made more sense as a wild resource than as livestock. A single bear may be big enough to feed an entire village, but it was never practical enough to feed the world.